Supply Chain Talk, the live webinar with no presentations, no PowerPoint, just talk.
Good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of Supply Chain Talk. My name's Alistair Charlton, your host this afternoon. Our main subject today is on supply chain talent of the future, but before that I'll introduce my guests and we'll discuss a topical news story related to our main subject. As always, we invite comments from all of you in the chat panel, and I know that the other audience members always appreciate the comments, and we'll try and pick up as many of them as we can during the discussion. And we'll be awarding, in the traditional way, a Supply Chain Talk mug to the contribution that we find the most valuable. So look forward to your feedback and interaction there. So let me introduce, without further ado, my guests. And the first of these is Anna Maria Velika, who is the founder of Green Apple's Career and an international procurement and supply chain leader. Green Apple's Career is a career mentoring hub with a heart and purpose to help the underrepresented professionals address challenges they face in starting and growing their career. So obviously very relevant to our supply chain talent discussion. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you for having me.
Great. My second guest is Sébastien Varin, who is Director of SHE, Sustainability and Process Safety for EU Supply Chain at Ecolab. Sébastien is a QHSE and engineering leader who's committed to both occupational and process safety, quality, engineering, sustainability, and TPM. He's experienced in the sectors of construction, microelectronics, and the chemical industry, and uses data-driven decisions and empowers and energizes teams to address client challenges. And it's worth saying that Ecolab is a global leader in water, hygiene, and infection prevention solutions and services, and has nearly 3 million locations of customers in the food, healthcare, hospitality, and industrial markets in more than 170 countries. Our third guest is Derek Westfall, who is supply chain professor at Portland State University and fresh from celebrating Independence Day yesterday. So Dr. Derek Westfall is supply chain faculty member at Portland State University and is currently the president of Westfall Consulting Group. He recently retired from the Boeing company and has 35 years of supply chain experience. And finally, Jim Brailsford is Senior Director for Industry and Solutions Marketing at Kinaxis. He's a 25-year servant of the logistics and supply chain industry, and he has spent time living in Asia and Europe in wide-reaching leadership roles across sales, solutions, go-to-market, and industry strategy and thought leadership in global logistics and supply chain solutions providers. And Jim currently leads the industry outreach at Kinaxis. So welcome all four of you. And our article today is entitled 3 Supply Chain Recruitment Trends to Watch in 2023. It's an article from the Cambridge Network, UK based in Cambridge, UK, which is a membership organisation bringing people together through networking, learning, recruitment and events. And the article talks about basically the kind of some of the real key trends to watch in recruitment in 2023. It also leads by mentioning some of the themes that have emerged in recent years, and it reckons those themes are the war for talent in supply chain, and secondly, the need for risk management and agility to be handled well in supply chains, which clearly we've seen with COVID and all sorts of other huge disruptions in our supply chains recently. And the 3 trends it says to watch out for in terms of recruitment are the continued emphasis on data to drive solutions to disruptions, so i.e. get people who've got data and analytical skills. It says an increased focus on candidates with experience in ethical sourcing, which of course ties in with the need for ethical supply chains and actually ties in as well with sustainability, which the article mentions. And the third trend they mention is increased focus on candidates with experience in the circular supply chain. So again, I guess sort of fitting in with the whole environmental and sustainable themes that we are seeing, generally in supply chains. So I don't think we disagree massively with what they've included. I guess the question is, are these the real key areas to look for experienced candidates, or are there some other really important trends? So Anna, would you agree with those 3? Those are the ones, or do you think there's some really important things to add there?
Yes, Alistair, totally agree with these trends. And actually, this is power, technology, data, analytics, mathematical models to forecast the yearly volumes, and definitely sustainability agenda, the ESG, and the suppliers diversity. What's not mentioned is the soft skills. Supply chain, to future-proof supply chain, is fundamental to hire people who are great communicators. I think this is the only caveat, and this is why supply chain will be the profession of the future, because of constant change. Highly, the consumer is becoming more agile and more sophisticated. So all the producers, supply chain will need to keep up with the consumer trends, but also supply chain needs to communicate crisis. And we've seen it, what's happened in COVID crisis, but also communication with the customers, with the distribution centers, with the consumer. So this is the only caveat, critical communication skills and great communication skills.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Sebastian, what would your thoughts be on the key things to look for when recruiting?
No, definitely the points driven by the article are the right ones. I'm based in Europe. Europe wants to be the first continent carbon neutral, so definitely a big focus on ethical sourcing and circular economy. But I'm also with Anna Maria. I would add some few ones. For example, based on what we said about disruption in supply chain, I think adaptability and agility are key criteria, key soft skill we are looking. We want people flexible, open to change. We are living in a dynamic environment in the supply chain, so we need people that are capable to evolve through the circumstances. So that's something I would add also.
Okay, thank you. And Derek, I know that you've done some research or been involved in some research in this area. Kind of, how does your research compare? Oh, you're on mute, Derek. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. One thing the article didn't mention that I think should be in there would be the overall view of the supply chain, the end-to-end view of supply chain, right? I think that employers would be looking for that as well. I mean, obviously, all the soft skills that Anna mentioned and the stuff that's in the article is highly important. But I think the one thing that would be missing is that end-to-end supply chain view. So, in other words, if you're a logistic analyst, how does your job tie into the overall supply chain? It's not just this siloed effect anymore.
Okay, that's really interesting thought, and you'd say that really because I guess the article hasn't really said at what level we're recruiting, but would you say that's important even at the junior level? You know, is that not something they would learn?
Yeah, that's certainly, I would say it's a requirement, right? Because we're trying to break down these silos and the future supply chains, trying to get this holistic view of the whole organization. And certainly how your role, you may be a logistic analyst or you may be a purchaser or whatever, but you need to understand how your role ties into the bigger picture of the organization.
Okay, that's a really interesting point to look for that sort of open-minded, that kind of wider view, even in junior roles. Thank you. And finally, Jim, your thoughts on the trends identified there.
Look, I think certainly the points that are raised in the article, 100% agree. Similar to the rest of the panel here, very much valid. I was jumping up and down inside as soon as Anna mentioned, the soft skills, because that is absolutely critical to getting forwards with this. Sebastian came back in then with, the need to be agile. We've got to be flexible. We know supply chain challenges are getting more and more frequent. The level of disruption is just increasing. And Derek's point that, that end-to-end wider perspective, really key. Difficult to add a little bit more to that, to be fair, because I think, those are the big challenges for us. One thing I would say is obviously this is really focused on experienced supply chain talent. And I know we're going to go on to talk about what the talent of the future is. So, it's okay having the experience and saying, well, we want to go and take, experienced people into these. But, I'm also equally focused on how we bring that, the next generation of supply chain talent through, which I know we're going to talk about shortly.
Absolutely. Before we do that, though, because it's such an interesting point, and this is all related to the main subject, so we're happy to spend just a moment more. But just one additional question, and that is just how important is it that you take people from supply chain? We're talking a lot about the open-mindedness, the skills with numbers and analysis, the knowledge of or an appreciation of circular supply chains, adaptability and change. And in a way, you could say none of these are really, specific to supply chain. So I guess sort of running around very quickly, Anna, how open are you if you're recruiting to say, actually, you've never worked in supply chain, I don't mind. I can see you're absolutely the right person. You've got those skills. You'll learn supply chain quick enough, whereas you can't learn those other skills. So that balance, what are your thoughts?
I will share a quick story.
Yeah.
I was recruited as a head of supply chain, coming from 15 years of procurement only. So back to Derek, I was bored, and the company created internal mobility for me, but they put me as a head of supply chain for a critical business, critical product, baby food, to head up supply chain, because they said the soft skills and the leadership skills are there. We will allow Anna to work with specialists, with demand planner, supply planner, and the end-to-end, supply chain to do the job. So it was a successful test.
Yeah.
It was the first time. So I think more and more companies need to open up, because supply chain is lagging behind some other functions. So I think more and more we need to test, we need to embrace, and it's called cognitive trust, because we trust people and we know they know their jobs, but also it's emotional trust.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great, fantastic example. What better example to have than that? Sebastian, your thoughts on that balance?
Yes, no, for me, the thing I'm looking for, and they are not limited to supply chain people at all, that's really problem solving and critical thinking skills. So people could come from whatever areas. If you are a problem solver and you have this critical thinking mindset, you could analyze complex situation and propose innovative solution, you are definitely a potential key asset for my scope and my supply chain, because that's what we want. Again, that's linked with the agility and flexibility I was talking about. But problem solving and critical thinking is a rare thing to find or really being developed. And when you find it, whatever you come from, that's a real asset.
Yeah. Okay, great. Derek,
Yeah, I think that Anna and Sebastian both hit great points. I think it comes down to those soft skills. If there's somebody in your organization that is looking to move, and they've been there for a while, even the supply chain is great, because supply chain, people think it's complex, but the actual fundamentals of supply chain fairly rudimentary, right? You buy something, you make something, you ship something. I mean, that's supply chain. I mean, we can make it sound that easy, but it's not overly complex. A lot like engineering, where you have to have a math degree or anything like that. And certainly it's more exciting than finance or anything like that, to where if you have those problem solvers and the people with the critical thinking skills, the supply chain is perfect career move for somebody.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I have to say, you so often get that in functions, people kind of making out, oh, it's also specialist and so on, or when you work in a different industry, oh, you don't know our industry, it's so special. But actually, fundamentally, a supply chain is a supply chain, and there will be some characteristics to watch for. But I think people, it's a natural thing to perhaps overcomplicate and over specialize and think that they're special. Jim, your thoughts on the matter?
Again, I agree. I think, looking to adjacent spaces is key. Looking for people who are of that right inquisitive mindset, who are looking for the next challenge, who are naturally problem solvers. Those are the people who I think are going to excel in supply chain with the challenges we have right now. I generally look for people who are also slightly different to me. So it's bringing that diversity into the mix, thinking slightly different. We don't want a million people who think the same as Jim. Otherwise nothing gets improved upon. So that's what we really look for as we're moving forwards, is those different perspectives which we can all collaborate together on for the greater good.
Yeah, I can see Anna agreeing hugely, but we'll get to diversity in a minute, Anna. I know you've got lots of great things to share on that. Let's move to the main topic now, the supply chain talent of the future. And the first agenda point is one we've just been covering to some extent, but they've got a little bit of follow-up there. So the agenda point is what skills and aptitudes to look for and how to improve your talent management. So a few things in that. And I think perhaps the first thing to touch on is that we've seen how the article mentioned some of the experience that it says we should be looking for. We discussed some of the more less specific skills, well, very, very important skills, but not tied directly to supply chain experience. But are there particular skills needed in addition, for more specific trends in supply chain, like, automation, AI, blockchain, Internet of Things? Are these things that can be easily learned, or do we need in some roles to be looking for real, very specific expertise like that? So Anna, over to you on that one. Do you think there are some areas where you do absolutely need that definite solid experience and particular skills?
Yes, definitely. If we look at demand planning and supply planning, you really need specialists, because you need someone who knows how to forecast accurately, and you need someone who knows how to plan the production plan to send the signal to the factory. So this is crucial. In a crisis situation, in COVID, it was a crisis situation for all of us, I think. The most critical roles are demand and supply planning. So these are two examples that you need that expertise. So the people who listen to us and they are passionate about this, segment of supply chain, definitely it requires expertise. However, there is a lot of innovation in how you can, move people around, job rotations, in order to allow employees to learn from each other. But also it's important, the soft skills, someone agile who did transportation or logistic and now has that agility that Sebastian was talking about to step in supply planning, and in 1 month he can or she can be up to speed. So I think it's a mixed bag, yes, of agility, expertise, but also the company needs to allow internal mobility, and this is key for retaining supply chain.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sebastian. Your thoughts on some of those, really specific emerging areas of technology and different ways of working that might need specialist skills?
Yes, definitely. With the Internet of Things, and we are capturing more and more data, that's becoming key to have some skills and expertise in analyzing the data. That's now really easy to build some Power BI or whatever dashboard and having a lot of data. Difficulty is that you could have 25 reports or 600 and they are not useful. The key things we are looking is really how to make these things into actions, how to make this report, this data being programs, really going to the end-to-end, having this data being insightful and driving improvements and driving actions. That's the key points. And that's super easy to capture data and create dashboard. That's less easy to transform them into action that are actually transforming the supply chain. So that's a key specific thing, I think, for supply chain. Anna took the example of planning, but that's true in quality, procurements. We are using a lot of data, really a lot of data, and you have to be careful to not be part of the problem. AI could generate a lot of data, and you could be the one creating bureaucracy. So that's really a key factor to watch out.
Yeah, and I guess it's an interesting example because that's where AI potentially actually can do a lot of that legwork of processing the data and pulling out what you do need to action, which I guess is all part of the new skills needed. And Derek, but just before I move to you, in fact, I'm trusting on you to know this acronym because I've forgotten what it stands for. Bayrem has asked us, what are the skills needed to manage supply chain in this VUCA, the VUCA era? I have seen
Yeah.
it, but I forgot what it stands for.
I saw that question. I have no idea what that means.
Okay.
To be honest, I have no idea.
Well, Bayram, perhaps share what the acronym stands for, and then we can comment on it, because it's I think it's a very related question. But Derek, over to you on those thoughts of some of that new technology and how that might change the skills that we need to look for.
Yeah, I don't know that it changes the skills that we're looking for, other than to add that, as all of these new emerging technologies take place in our supply chains and our organizations, we have to remember that change is going to be constant from now on, right? It's going to be this ever changing organization that's coming up with the new technologies, implementing the new technologies. It's not like we can set a deadline for January 1st, 2024 to be fully implemented into all these technologies, right? It's going to be this evolution that we just keep going through. So people need to be adaptable. I would also say that, to me, my top 4 traits of anybody that gets into supply chain that's not already there: they need to have a sense of urgency, a strong customer focus, attention to detail, and strong communication skills. Or if you really lack any of those, then you're not getting the whole. You're not fulfilling all the needs of the supply chain, right? Because there's these crises that come up, so you need to have this sense of urgency. You have to be able to communicate up and down the whole organization. You're talking to the president of a company a lot different than you would talk to the shop floor, those types of things. So I think those 4 things I just mentioned are absolutely critical for the skills, the soft skills of people entering supply chain.
Okay, thank you, Derek. And I can see, Jim, you were fast on the internet, as was Chris Bruce. So VUCA stands for actually some of those points we've been discussing of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think it relates to that need for agility and to deal with change as well. So Jim, your comments then on other skills, given some of the technological trends and perhaps more specific areas of knowledge that are needed.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the sense of urgency and the ability to pick out the points. That's one of the great things of any of the automated systems we have now, AI and ML, is they can process masses and masses of data quickly. The challenge is you still need the human intervention to really then pick out and act upon what is being shown through those trends. And there's been much debate and discussion around, is AI going to replace people? To a degree, no, it's not, because it's actually going to augment what we do and enable us to focus on what are the key issues that we need to deal with. So that's what I would say around the use of AI and therefore the abilities to it. I think as we sort of progress more towards bringing in the future, we have a generation. If we look back to my generation, graduating 30 years ago, where barely anybody even had a mobile phone, let alone anything else, and our graduate papers were handwritten, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now we have a generation who are brought up on touchscreen technology, have a tablet in their hand from the minute they can, almost before they can walk, type of thing. So they're just totally savvy with this technology. And I think that's the one thing that's accelerating how our future talent into supply chain can progress, because they are just so aware of this, and therefore it brings it up much more quickly. And we've got to keep up with that to ensure that it keeps them interested too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So our second point is our second point on the agenda is, how is AI impacting acquisition and retention of your next generation of supply chain talent? So I guess perhaps two questions in there really are can AI help us identify the right individuals to recruit? And indeed we talked about already saying, can it move us away from focusing too much on people who have done exactly the same job before, which is often in the past has been a very traditional, very narrow way of recruiting. So, and then on the other side of things, is AI being used to identify where there might be a risk of an employee leaving? And if you can identify early on someone who, in whatever way, is not happy, without it being, I guess, too much too intrusive on watching how many emails they send or when they leave the office, you could be invading privacy. But are there ways that AI can also help, retention there? So on the AI side of things, Anna, have you got any sort of experience or insights on that?
Yes, more and more supply chain and companies are accelerating the onboarding of technology and robotics in warehouses. The multinational companies I worked for are implemented the robotics like 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, and I see it on the news now. So, but this technology comes as an enabler, and this has to do with the supply chain talent needs to see the technology as something to make their job better, which is the case, but you need the right mindset to perceive technology as an enabler, not as a threat. And I think people who listen to us, this is critical, because everything starts with the right mindset. Yes, definitely, when we look at huge corporations that rapidly digitalize, do a lot of robotics in their logistics, their GPS implemented in the vans that communicate more optimized routes in order to reduce carbon footprint. This is amazing. But we need, this technology comes with, it's cool to have, my job is much better because of the technology. Mm-hmm. So I think this is the mindset that we need to embrace a job in supply chain.
Okay, thank you. So, Sebastian, have you sort of come across AI being used to help recruitment decisions?
Yes, definitely. So the AI is heavily used for skills assessments. Now we have a lot of tools, so that's the end of the usual interview in one-to-one. Now you have some tests, and that's quite useful because that assesses better the skills and capabilities. That evaluates also the knowledge, the problem-solving abilities I was talking about, but also the critical thinking. So that's provide objective insight for the recruiter to know if we have the right candidate, but also looking for development opportunities, because you could have some strengths and we know how to develop yourself. At executive level, we are going through full day of tests, definitely looking on how you react on the etc. That's useful for us because we know where we have to improve. So definitely AI, I think, is providing a better objective insights. For talent retention, yes, also. I mean, that's definitely identify patterns and signals. So that that indicates employee disengagement. So we have performance metrics. We are talking, so we are not looking about emails, but we have performance metrics. But we have also all this sentiment analysis from survey tools. So when you have people saying, okay, are you looking for another job, or do you think included in your team? AI is analyzing us this data and is giving us really, really insight about where we have to react. And that's for your team, that's for the company, that's for the entire supply chain, and you react on different levels on that. So AI is really useful on that because you monitor and you could actually act on improving on several aspects. And the last point, and that's a little bit like Anna Maria was talking about, that's process automation. I mean, the fact that we are removing repetitive tasks, that's allowing employees to focus on the more strategic value-added activities. And that's a key thing. You don't have to repeat the same Excel or data entry all the time. Now we have to for that. So you could focus on really things that have added value, and that's improving the retention of employees, definitely.
Those are really interesting points you make, Sebastian, and I think certainly that technology, it's even on the sort of the warehouse floor when actually people are not having to walk up and down for miles every day. They're working alongside a sort of cobot in effect. It makes for a more interesting and less tiring job as well. Derek, I'm sure in your work you come across lots of examples of new practice, leading practice. What would you like to share with us?
Well, Alistair, I hate to disappoint you, but I'm an academic, and we're about 10 years behind. AI, my students probably know more about AI than I do, to be completely honest. I have, what I can say is that down the road, I mean, obviously this is going to be more and more prevalent based on Sebastian and Anna's comments, is that there's just so much out there, right? But the job is going to change. And I can see now with the people that I consult with that there's a complete lack of manpower to do the task jobs, right? Like the warehousing jobs, and they just can't find truck drivers, they can't find warehouse workers. So that's where this technology is going to impact supply chain first, is in those areas, because they just simply can't fill the need physically with the people. So that's why I see as the emerging stuff. But I also go back to my point about being adaptable and going with the flow. If you're completely happy coming in to work each day and releasing POs based off MRP and doing the stuff you've done over and over and over for the last 20 years, you're in for a rude awakening here pretty soon, because all that stuff's going to be that's going to be obsolete. What we need is your critical thinking skills and how we're going to improve things.
Yeah. No, thank you. And just before I move to you, Jim, a really nice example from Chris Bruce. Thank you, Chris, where he's mentioning how they do use AI to review at-risk groups of in terms of retention, and he does stress that in that case it's I think is it being about to be posted up? Yeah, here we go. And it does he does stress that it's not specific to the individual, but to identify particular groups. And I think that ties in, Sebastian, with the sort of example you were giving. So it is possible to use AI to identify at-risk groups without breaching privacy. If you've asked people to complete a survey, that is private and their answers are confidential. So thank you for sharing that, Chris. Jim, finally, your thoughts on the AI question, the technology question.
Well, I think, like I said earlier, so I'll keep it short. But yeah, I think AI, the modeling that we can use machine learning for, it learns from data, but the number of, should we say, black swan events mean that that's always going to interrupt the learning. So whilst it's useful for processing lots and lots of data inputs, you still need the person to be out there doing, I think Derek, you mentioned it, the value add activity. We see what we do in supply chains as, obviously keeping our customer at the center, and we're in the service of humanity. We want to do the best for the planet as well, because we've only got one planet. I've talked previously about there is no planet B option with what we do here. So, we need to have meaningful purpose for what we do. So therefore, the value added activity is key. I mean, all of the other elements of, going into, Industry 4.0 and wearable tech in the warehouse, I think that's great, because that is actually just augmenting the operative's activity. So that's a really positive side. But I don't think we're ever going to get away from the use of AI in certain areas. I think there's a comment just come in about, genuine AI should be able to process also emotions and feelings. I'm kind of not sure we want to go there, but yeah, AI has been used for many years in the recruitment space anyway. I mean, we know ourselves from the automated tracking systems that would sift CVs on applications. That's something that's been there for many years. I think almost all Fortune 500 companies have been using these tools for quite some while. So it's really getting back to, I think we said in the very first comments, it's those intangible skills that really will differentiate for the future.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the last point, I'd just like to pick up just on that retention and indeed the recruitment issue, and perhaps just to address diversity and gender mix, because I know, Anna, that's a real passion of yours. But one specific thing I'd like to sort of perhaps, you don't all have to answer it, but we talked a lot about the need for communications skills and so on. But is there a risk that is making us not diverse enough? Because there are, it's well known, very analytical people, great data crunchers, can be fantastic people, but actually, they may be, somewhat on an Asperger's scale or whatever, and therefore they're not great communicators, and they don't like being forced into very, very communicative events and surroundings. So is there a risk that we can just push too much, saying everyone's got to be decisive, communicative, collaborative, and so on, and actually we can be missing out on some really great skills? So that's a specific example. Anna, what would you like to share on the subject of diversity and retention and recruitment and retention?
That was a good observation about not everyone is an extrovert. Not everyone is a great communicator, and we need diversity. Diversity means we need introverts, we need extroverts, we need analytical skills, we need management and leadership skills. So this is where an amazing company would manage to attract the right talent. And now, just transitioning into your, can you remind me the question exactly, Alistair?
It was really, I suppose, just to be commenting on, what are your thoughts on how we address diversity and gender and so on when we're both in recruitment and in retention? It was a fairly wide question. Really.
Yeah, I think gender diversity in supply chain is no-brainer. If you look around, supply chain is male-dominated. Back in my time, I was the exception at the table, but I loved that. I love to break barriers, but I think also sometimes it can be exhausting for someone like a woman surrounded by only male colleagues. So this is some things that also my clients I'm working with, they try to bring in mentorship for female leaders in order to create that equity for women in supply chain to stay and to receive that boost and equitable support to apply for promotions in supply chain. So gender diversity, but diversity is diversity of thoughts, diversity of backgrounds, I think, but also creating that equity.
Yeah.
Because everyone talks about diversity, but equity is creating the necessary support for underrepresented. So so this is important.
Thank you, and a really nice example there about mentoring, which can be for all employees, who are kind of rising up the ranks. It's a great way of really supporting and growing them and getting their loyalty as well. Sebastian, what are your thoughts on the whole diversity issue?
No, that's a topic. Definitely, we have to promote diversity and inclusion. That's clear. Supply chain, Anna is right, is male dominant, and we are the one that are bringing the change. So that's clear that we have to create more opportunities to have people contributing and thrive. The best teams are the diverse team. Diverse opinion, I like that. That's what we want. I think Jim was mentioning that. We don't need people agreeing with us or thinking like us. So we need the best team is something with gender diversity, inclusion, but also different qualities. So you could have good communicator, you could have good data analytics. At the end of the day, that's what leadership is. Leadership teams are the one that inspiring, motivating others, and create this kind of common ownership on a common goal. So you have to find leadership is the one in charge to make sure that all these different qualities and diversity are working toward the common goal. And so again, my experience is that the most diverse team are the best team.
Yeah, definitely. Derek, I guess you're teaching and inspiring the new generation of supply chain talent, I hope. How are you seeing diversity in your campus?
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's still very male dominated in my classrooms. Easily 70-30 male female, and then let alone the overall diversity of different backgrounds, that sort of stuff is lacking. And to Sebastian and Anna's point is that, look, this is not something that's nice to do or going to be the right thing to do. It's going to be required. Like, you're going to have to do this because eventually your workforce is going to be, there's not going to be enough workers. So we have to embrace these new ideas and everything, get out of this male dominated this position that we're in to draw these people into this profession. And it is an exciting profession. I think it's the best profession out there. And to Anna Maria's point is that the next 10 years, this is going to be the profession because some of the jobs may be replaced.
Yeah. Thank you. And finally, Jim, I guess you're in Kinaxis. I guess there's quite a lot of sort of data and analytical folk there, and
of course,
a mix of the sort of technical people and the external facing people.
Of course, and look, again, we've all got different roles to play in this. There is such a broad mix of people that's required. So really, my sort of comment here would be, from a diversity perspective, we've got to be balanced. You've got to have all these different points of view. Like I said earlier, a million points of view that the same as mine. That's great. I'm in an echo chamber. That's never going to get anyone anywhere. I think it comes into the overall company culture. The tone from the top, if you will, to be just driving that through the organization and ensuring that the people who are in the leadership roles today embrace that too, and are therefore welcoming all walks of life and different states of people, mind, however you want to refer to it, into the organization, because there's future talent in there, and that's what we've got to harness today. Derek's spot on with, it's a changing environment, and we are not necessarily going to have those same numbers of people to fulfill the roles that we have right now. That's going to move. So therefore, we've got to be able to move with it. We've got to look at how we can encourage the next generation of leaders. We've done some of that within Kinaxis. We've started with our academic program, and that's at a high school level. So at least there, we're starting to engage with them and work with universities and collaborate with customers there. I think you can go further to that, of course. I mean, there's much more to be done, but I think that's the way forwards, and it's to bring all of the different things into the mix, if you will. We've got to be sure that these people feel empowered, they've got the tools to actually be successful, and really that they believe that they've got some credible leadership who are going to support them in the career path.
Yeah, thank you. So that leads nicely when you're talking about developing the next generation of leaders, which is our third and final point: growing the next generation of leaders, preparing your resources for industry changes. So briefly, because we've had such a long and interesting discussion about the other topics, Anna, what would you recommend as effective options to develop future leaders?
I loved what Jim said about the company culture and about the board of directors that pave the way and the culture. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. Governance is all about how diverse the board is. Me, as a worker in the warehouse, do I feel represented? Do I have someone who is like me in the board of directors? And also governance is about business ethics, inclusive recruitment policies, internal mobility, eliminate discriminatory performance management practices, make sure that you have non-biased talent calibration. And I could carry on because how passionate I am, but everything, this is the important part of the ESG, the governance, and the leaders, they need to understand this.
Okay, thank you. Sebastian, what would be your advice or thoughts on developing the next generation of leaders?
So for me, that's all about identifying the high potential. That's clear, and giving them offer to them a leadership development program. So we touch about mentoring, but we could also have coaching workshops, meet and learn sessions. So this new generation has changed. That's the social revolution. They look for something else. That's quality of life versus standard of life. But how could they grow at the same time as the company? So when you have high potential, you really have to look to offering them this mentorship, this coaching things. And then that's succession planning. They have to know, you have to target development opportunities. You can't have talent entering in your company and not thinking about, okay, what could I do? And we know that a career is not straight away. You could have lateral move, transversal moves. So I think these 3 points, identifying HPO, offer leadership development program, and succession planning are the key points for me to go the next generation of leader.
Thank you. Those are some really good, clear insights there. Derek, on your side of things, are you involved quite a lot in supporting companies with courses and so on to develop people?
Not directly, but if I'm asked to speak or asked to talk about this subject, what I would say is that up until COVID, and even during COVID, we tried to have this efficient supply chain, like the JIT, and cut down costs as much as we could. And of course, COVID blew a hole right through that whole theory, right? So we're now entering this next phase of supply chain evolution, right? And so our leaders need to be prepared for constant change. They can't just accept the status quo, worry about it tomorrow, or we'll get it next quarter, or whatever. This is really an ongoing change. So our next leaders need to embrace change. The other part of that is we have to identify leaders early by what type of leaders are they? Are they transformational leaders? Are they servant leaders? Are they authentic leaders? And then put them in the right roles.
Thank you very much, Derek. And finally, Jim, you already touched on what can Axis do with university, working with universities and even schools. Your thoughts on developing future leaders?
Well, much of it I think has already been said. I really subscribe to it's that career planning. I think the talent that we are seeing coming into industry today, their propensity to change is higher than we've ever known, because they are very keen to progress. I think that's the one thing that we need to keep on top of, is ensuring that that they feel that they have that career path in front of them, and that therefore that they are being nurtured towards being the future leader that we see them. Otherwise, they will very simply, quickly just switch off, go somewhere else. I think that's the plan. So I would just leave it at that point. It's that career planning perspective on top of what we've already said.
Yeah, and I think that fitted in a little bit with what Sebastian said. They can see there is a path for them, and that is also a great way of retaining people. Great. Well, thank you very much, all four of you, for some fantastic insights and keeping us to time as well, which is brilliant. In terms of contributions to the audience, lots of great comments there, and I'll pick out Chris Bruce for a Supply Chain Talk mug. Thank you, Chris. You gave us a really interesting example earlier. The next episode of Supply Chain Talk is next Wednesday, the 12th of July, at the same time, 4 p.m. UK time. It'll be hosted by Kevin Crane again next week, and the subject is actionable insights to innovate the supply chain. So please do join us then. And finally, thank you again to my guests, Anna Maria Velika, founder of Green Apple's Career, Sebastian Verin, director of SHE at Ecolab, and Derek Westfall, supply chain professor at Portland State University, and finally, Jim Brailsford, senior director for industry and solutions marketing at Kinaxis. So thank you, all four of you. Thank you, audience, for your attention and your comments. And I hope you'll be joining us next week. Goodbye.